My name is Ross McGregor. I'm the Artistic Director of Arrows and Traps Theatre Company, the Associate Theatre Company out of the Jack Studio, London. This is part 2 of our series of retrospectives, looking back over our previous work at some of my personal favourite productions. As well as this, we're fundraising and asking for donations to help us with the fallout of COVID-19 and the devastation that it's had on the theatre industry. To those of you that have already donated, thank you so much. It's vastly appreciated, and we're honoured that we're after 2 weeks we're halfway to our goal. So that's fantastic. So the next production we're going to look at is Jekyll Hyde. This is an adaptation of the Robert Louis Stevenson novella. I wrote and directed it. Jacqueline Hyde was a real standout for me because it was the first production that we did that went on tour. Part of a new model I was trying to facilitate, where we took our work further than London and reached out to new audiences. And I thought that a set text, such an iconic story, redone, re-envisioned, would be a great way to start off that process.
My name's Will Pynchon and I played Henry Jekyll.
I'm Chris Tester and I played Edward Hyde.
I'm Lucy Ioannou and I played Gabrielle Utterson.
Hi, my name is Gabrielle Nellis-Payne and I played Imogen Poole in Jekyll Hyde.
I'm Charlie and I played Dr. Hayley Lanyon in Jekyll Hyde.
When I said about adapting Jekyll Hyde, I knew that it was such an iconic and well-known story. I really needed to do something new with it. I needed to update it. So I wanted to set it in modern day and make it as relevant and as topical to now, to try and get a parallel between what Stevenson was saying in 1885 with 2019, 2020. The Victorians had such a preoccupation with reputation and scandal that I couldn't really find an equivalent in modern day society, with the exception of potentially politics. A scandal could derail a politician's career, and I think that's still true now. When I was writing it in 2019, if I was going to set it in the political arena of the UK, I would have to mention Brexit, and I got a little bit tired of that back and forth argument. So I decided to set it in the United States.
Our adaptation of The Strange Case of Jacqueline Hyde is set in 2020 in the USA during the presidential elections. Now the president has fallen, impeached due to corruption, and a young liberal mayor, Henry Jekyll, decides to announce his candidacy to run for the office.
The play follows the same structure as the book, basically. It follows a young, brilliant press secretary named Gabrielle Utterson, who's working for this mayor of Indiana, who's running for president, trying to help him. As we find out more, she finds out more and more about this mysterious figure, Hyde, who keeps sort of popping up and is connected to Henry Jekyll, and her task is to figure out how he's connected.
And she becomes obsessed with him, with this darkness and hate that he attracts, that he emanates and attracts from other people. So she delves deeper and deeper into his activities, into his relationship with Henry.
Little does she know that they're very connected. And
it all ends up accumulating in one final night, where she ends up facing her worst fear.
So the play follows the plot of the book, as we find out that these two differing men are one.
Jekyll Hyde was important when it was first released because it was one of the first works to encourage the exploration of a dual personality in the individual and also in society as a whole. Not to mention looking at the rise of science, the favouring of science over religion which up to that point hadn't been hugely explored.
And I thought Ross's adaptation worked really well and lent itself to this kind of politically driven, really relevant take on a classic novel, which in turn made it more accessible for the audience.
I've always been a big fan of shows like The West Wing and the BBC original House of Cards, political dramas. They seemed immensely complicated, but such fun to watch, and you feel a little bit like you're sort of being educated at the same time as entertained. I've always wanted to try and write one, but never really known if I could. The issues that Stevenson's discussing in his book, the ideas of sin and the debate of science and religion and the birth of psychology, whilst they're issues certainly for the late 19th century, they're not as topical for now, and I thought a political genre would allow us to deal with the core themes of the novel and yet deal with it in a way that touched upon issues of today.
I really enjoyed how Ross pulled in, the issues of the day: Black Lives Matter, climate change, Trump, and how we're going to sort of deal with that afterwards. And that made it very relevant. And also, as we kept doing it, more and more things became relevant. Things you would go, well, Utterson's father has this horrible child pornography thing. And then the Epstein story in the news, in the real life news, just kind of kicked off. And that's sort of what happens when you deal with topical material.
I think politics was always a kind of a good fit for Jacqueline Hyde because there's an inherent distrust of politicians with the birth of things like the internet. No one's infallible anymore. Everyone has an innate suspicion about their honesty, even when they're trying to say good things. And they're often sort of linked to being two-sided. The spin, the talking points, the side of themselves that they present to the world versus any part of them that they're trying to restrict. And yet also in politics right now there is a inescapable sense of hope in that the United States is coming to the end of Trump's first term, potentially his only term, and how do you come back from 4 years of Trump? Does he get in again, or is there some space? Is there a chance of something new, something better? And in a way, I think both countries, in the UK and in the United States, they're waiting for somebody to step forward and promise real, permanent change. And that really is what my play is about.
My character was based upon the Indiana mayor, Pete Buttigieg, who is this sort of charismatic, articulate, gay mayor who had taken the Democratic field by storm. And so we used... we were just able to make today very dramatic, and also the drama seemed very relevant, and that was really exciting.
My favourite part of the process was probably during rehearsals and getting to grips with the characters that we were given and delving into that world. And then after the first stint of shows, getting those rewrites after Christmas and seeing how the characters and story had developed further.
My favourite part of the process was undoubtedly being a part of the company, being a part of Arrows and Traps. The whole process is a dream from start to finish with both of the shows that I've done for them. The rehearsal process is exciting and encouraging and safe and more creatively fulfilling than I often find a a rehearsal process to be. The actual performance of the shows is fun and endlessly interesting, and I also have a smallish amount of stage time in Jekyll and Hyde, and so being able to watch the others do their jobs so well when I'm at leisure is also brilliant. It's just great. It's such a treat to be in the presence of so many talented and lovely people.
Because Jacqueline Hyde spanned over 9 months from the beginning of rehearsals all the way through until the end of our tour, I'm going to say that I've got 4 favourite moments as opposed to 1. The first being when I was away from rehearsals because I was actually on honeymoon, and I saw pictures of various other members of the Arrows and Traps company were reading in my part, and it just gave me that lovely sense of, regardless of what show you're doing, it's not just the cast and creatives in that show that are involved in an Arrow and Traps company, but there's actually a wider network and family here all supporting and pulling together. So that was nice. Second is always the opening performance at the Brockley Jack, because the Brockley Jack as a venue, Kate and Carl are always so supportive, and that kind of like palpable beat once the show finishes and then the audience responds at the end, and they really got us, was really, really lovely and important.
I think there were a lot of things that worked in this show. I really liked that 3 of the 5 characters are now female, which is Utterson, Lanyon and Paul. I thought the design of it was brilliant. I really loved it, in terms of the lighting and the set.
My third favourite part would be with my producing hat on, getting the Arts Council funding for the second time of asking, because that was, I think, a really important step in our genesis and development as a company.
I thought that all the actors that I worked with were amazing and very much inspiring, consistently throughout rehearsals.
And finally, I would say one of our venues on tour was performing at the Georgian Theatre Royal in Richmond in Yorkshire, just because it's absolutely stunning theatre, the oldest still operating theatre in the UK, and it kind of was just like a perfect encapsulation of why we would want to take our work nationwide as opposed to just being London-centric as we had been up to that point. So it was a great way to kind of cap the experience.
And it's so important to be able to take theatre out regionally, to expose people to it who might not necessarily have that access. And it was just such a wonderful thing to be able to be a part of.
One of the things writing a new version of Jekyll and Hyde allowed me to do was to adapt and reinvent certain characters, and the 2 most adapted, and I'm gonna proffer the word original, were Imogen, Paul and Edward Hyde.
Imogen is an important character in this new adaptation because she firstly witnesses Hyde's attack, which is the starting point of the play and a really crucial plot point, which she reveals to Utterson. But more than that, she knows about Utterson's past, and they have a shared history, which means that Utterson confides in her and sees her as a confidant who she can trust. And Imogen is pretty consistently reliable throughout the whole story, up until the very bitter end when their relationship somewhat falls apart.
I think having the character of Edward as well as Hyde was very important to this particular version of the story, because it provided an extra context for the subsequent decisions that Henry had made, get a more of a 3-dimensional sense of who Henry was as a character before he actually takes a potion and kind of sets in motion all of the major beats of the traditional story as well. So there's a greater sense of all of the things that he's actually lost as a result, as well as tonally for me as an actor, being able to play the two complete opposites. You have Hyde, who's basically the embodiment of evil in many ways, or the embodiment of trauma, and then you have Edward, who is so warm, so loving, so humane. So that was an absolutely fantastic experience to be able to have all in one show.
I think the thing that worked best about this version of Jekyll and Hyde is the updating to the modern setting.
And I think the story of Jekyll and Hyde is so well known that it's very difficult to encourage people to want to experience it again. It's a classic. It's studied in schools as a set text for GCSE. And even if you've never read the book, I think most people know the story of Jekyll and Hyde, or at least the very basics of it.
By taking such a well-known story out of its original context and changing things up in such an unexpected way is really exciting.
And I think that was really important because it allowed people to experience the show for the first time, in a way, well, this story.
And pretty much everyone I spoke to who'd seen the show was thrown by the twist.
It allowed you to have that, the questioning, the sense of exhilaration, the mystery, to such a well-known story, and I think it really did it justice.
Which is great, particularly for something that's so well-known. It's really hard to make it new, to make it feel as exciting or as unexpected as it would have done when it was first released, and that's a real achievement, I think.
So that's the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching our retrospective on Jekyll and Hyde. It was a real favourite show of mine for multiple reasons, but the majority have already been covered. But the fact that we got to tour it, albeit prematurely ended by the coronavirus, was such a milestone for the company. So I'm really thrilled to look back at it. Thank you so much. The link for our donations page is in the description on the video. Any help in this dark time for theatres would be greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. Stay safe, stay home, and I'll see you soon.
Oh, that's awkward. Who's your daddy? Daddy, no!